Welcome back. So I've got something I'm really excited about here, right, is to talk through transportation fuels. So there's a lot going on. The demand is shifting. Volumetrically, we all understand OECD volumes are flat to going down. Emerging markets are growing. But interrelated to that is the need for some new fuels, some lower carbon. Now we've got the Trump administration kind of shaking things up, right, on the asking policy questions, right, about the priority of the energy transition vis-a-vis some of the other priorities, and then maybe a few tariffs thrown in there just to change the flows and change the outlook. So I've got a great panel here, so to help us unpack some of these topics here today. We've got to my left Andy Walls, President Downstream Midstream Chemicals with Chevron. To his left, Amber Russell, who's the SVP of Refining Terminals and Pipelines with BP. To her left, Shaima Al-Ghunaim with EVP Planning and Finance with KPI, Kuwait Petroleum International. And then to her left, down at the end, Takashimi Hashimoto, who's the Representative Director, President, CEO of Mitsui O.S.K. Lines, or MOL. So with that, let's get into it. Andy, I'm going to start with you, maybe with a general question to help kind of start to frame this out. How do you think about the balance of priorities today around this energy trilemma, affordability, sustainability, security?
Well, thanks, Kurt. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the session. Thanks for the question. Your question's actually an interesting one. I've been doing sessions like this for many years, and most times I don't get that question. I get that question about what is Chevron doing about decarbonization, and it's really good for you to say, hey, how are you dealing with affordability, reliability, and ever cleaner? Most of the time I have to pivot people to that as a position as to how Chevron thinks about energy. Yep. I'm encouraged as to the conversations that have happened this week. It does seem to be more in balance, more about, hey, it's got to be affordable, it has to be reliable for security reasons, and yes, we always have to make it cleaner. We've been talking about that for a long time, and it's exciting to see the room talking about that. It's exciting to see the administration talking about. So I think we're on the right path. I think energy is essential, and I think it's been a good week in my perspective because that's been talked about a lot.
Feels like it's kind of rebalancing or the pendulum swinging back at least maybe to the middle at least.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's essential. You can't get out of balance with any one of those legs of the stool. If you do, the stool kind of falls over. Yep. And we've seen some of that. There's been consequences, but I'm liking the way the conference has gone and the conversation.
Well, thanks. So Amber, I guess I've got to ask you the question here. BP did, I think you called it a strategic reset, right? How's that affecting your business and kind of how you're thinking about your priorities?
Yeah, so it's depending on who you talk to, I think you get different feelings of how much of a reset it was. I think for us, what we've really been focused on, right, is growing in our current markets where we're strong and building on strategic assets. It's about taking advantage of the integration that we have between refining, midstream, trading as well. So we have a lot of very strategic markets where that has a lot of value for us, and then also growing in the upstream part of our business. And that's a pretty significant change for us. I think the other piece that I think it's important to us, and I think it's important to the people that are investing, is our consistency of performance delivery and that edge in the conversation we are looking to increase. If I think about mobility and convenience, we've talked about, I would say, right sizing or high grading our portfolio. So we've talked a bit about taking a strategic view on Castrol, marketing one of our refineries in Germany, and then on our retail sites, kind of churning that bottom and high grading that portfolio as well. And we announced exit from Netherlands retail as well. So you're starting to see us focus on, it's still an and conversation for us, but it is right-sizing that low-carbon part of our business more consistent with where you see the customers, the demand, the support in the environment, in the government and regulatory environment.
Yeah, so not a complete reset, but maybe a refocus, I guess, on.
It's much more a refocus, and I think what we learned was we were trying to do too many things when we came out of our 2020 strategy. So you've seen us refocus and not just on what we're trying to deliver, but focusing on value, which means you've seen the pace slow down in a lot of the low carbon area.
Right. Takashi, maybe I can ask you. What do you see from your perspective, as a big buyer of bunker fuel, what do you see in terms of activities and your activities around decarbonizing your fleet?
Yes, that MOL is operating about 900 vessels all over the world, so that the day-to-day emission is quite enormous. And we already committed to reduce our GHG emission to net zero by 2050. For that, to do so that for the time being that we are trying to reduce our emission by utilizing the available fuels like LNG, methanol, instead of the traditional fuel oil. And apart from about 100 LNG carriers, we have quite many traditional ocean-going vessels like the tankers and bulkers, car carriers, containers. And gradually we are replacing them to the LNG bunkering, the vessel or methanol bunkering vessels. Still relatively small portion. However, that we already constructed almost 20 vessels that are using the alternative fuels, and our target is to achieve the number to that 80, 90 vessels. That in addition to that 100 LNG carriers are using these alternative fuels. That is for the time being that we will reduce the emission. But after the 5 years, 10 years time, at the same time, we gradually introduce the green products like green ammonia, green methanol, and to achieve the complete net zero.
So are these new vessels, or are you retrofitting the engines and tanks on?
Yeah, mainly the new vessels. That typically we will replace our fleet every 15 to 20 years, which means that every year that we have the replacement requirements, therefore that one by one that we are constructing the new.
Okay, all right, good. Shaima, love to get your perspective on the European, kind of what's happening in your view around decarbonizing European markets, which is, in some ways kind of ground zero maybe of the activity.
KPI is mainly working in Europe, and hence we have to obey by all of the regulations that's happening in Europe. And the number of regulations is enormous in terms of the decarbonization. So we're talking about the Renewable Energy Acts, RED 1 and 2 and 3, you have the CAPM, and others that we have to obey by. As a fossil fuel company, we need to diversify our product portfolio. We have to meet all of these regulations while maintaining our competitive advantage in the main field of activity that we're working. And the regulation differs from one European nation to the other. It's all aiming towards the net zero by 2050, but how to reach that is different from one country to the other. And you need to make sure you understand what's happening on ground in each country to be able to meet the regulations. But this is also aligned with my strategy as a KPI and KBC strategy to reach the net zero as well in 2050. That is not to remove the fossil fuel, but how to overcome the greenhouse gases by implementing initiatives that reduce your carbon footprints.
Okay, that's good to know. So some simplification needed in the European policy world.
They're currently doing some of the simplifications, and recently they have started some simplification of the procedures, of the reporting mechanism, and reducing some of the thresholds for reporting to make it easier. But this does not mean that we have to slow down. We need to meet all of the requirements, including the SAF requirement for aviation, among others.
Yeah, okay, all right, thanks. So let me turn a little bit to the geopolitics and policy side maybe a bit. Amber, I'm going to ask you kind of, how's this new administration started to change the conversations you're having with stakeholders, policymakers, in the U.S. and maybe outside?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we look forward to working with the administration on the activities that have kind of come out. And if you look at BP, our largest presence is in the U.S. A third of our workforce is here. We refine 40% of our capacity here, and as we increase our production in oil and gas, 50% of that will be here.
Right.
And so maintaining, and building that connection is extremely important for us. Tariffs, obviously a big point of conversation. Our largest refinery is in Whiting, Indiana, and we bring in Canadian crude. And so it's about, we've had a team stood up helping us understand, well, what does that mean? What are our internal options? But, our refineries are pretty well positioned, and we feel good about where we stand today, kind of despite the fickleness of what's out there. I think, but what's also interesting is when you take a look at what's happening around the world, and I would say, Germany is probably one of the biggest areas we've seen a more recent change with their, announcements, 10 days after their elections, really put into, this decision around how they're going to invest money and what they value. And that starts to see, valuing industry more, putting money into defense, more federal support. And that is a game changer for us. We have a lot of operations in Germany as well. And so it's all these shifts. It's not just the U.S., but it's across Europe as well. We're starting, to Andy's point earlier, we're starting to talk about things that we haven't talked about maybe in the last 4 years.
Okay, good. Andy, you were going to...
Yeah, I think Amber said it well. We're glad that the administration recognizes the need for affordable, reliable, and cleaner energy. It's clearly top of mind. It's been part of the early agenda. I think it's going to be good for the world that we can provide people with the energy they need. I don't know if you heard Secretary Wright say the other day there's still 2 billion people that are cooking with food waste or dung or wood, and they just don't have the standard of living that all of us enjoy. So I'm excited. I think we're headed in the right direction. There still are geographies that I'm concerned about. I've been fairly outspoken about California. I am concerned about California's investment proposition and enabling those products to be there for when the consumers need it and to be affordable. Hopefully that conversation changes a little bit there too. But I think we're headed in the right direction. I'm really excited.
I mean, you're worried about California from a competitiveness, almost like a European competitiveness challenge in its own way?
Yeah, I think, look, it's tough to make an investment decision in the traditional business in California. There's a lot of headwinds. There's some policies that don't allow you to maybe get a return that you need. And so money's going to go different directions. It will not go to that market. And the consequences of that maybe aren't felt today, but they're certainly going to be felt in the future because we have to invest to be affordable and we have to invest to be reliable, and we're always trying to make it cleaner. So I think it's something I'm watching very closely.
Okay. Yeah. Tashaki, I guess how do the tariffs and threats of tariffs, I mean, how does that affect your business? How are you kind of planning for that? I mean, that could really shift things around for your trade, right?
Yeah, the tariff issue is a very, very complicated issue for us. at the previous Trump government, that the same things happened, and then it created that the different trade pattern in the global. Then we adjusted that our operation style. For example, that obviously that the trade volume between China and the U.S. decreased, but at the same time that China increased their import from Brazil or South America or something like that, and so that the shipping industry is quite flexible, agile industry that we always are trying to change our position and then the increase or decrease our the operation pattern.
Right.
The problem is that the predictability or that that the tariff is coming and going and coming and going. That is a very, very difficult for us to decide our position. So that as long as that we can take that very clear idea what's going on for or coming
Right.
4 years or 5 years, 10 years, then we are quite confident that today's situation is not quite welcome for us, to be honest.
I hate to disappoint you, but I don't think you're going to get 5 years of certainty in the current situation, right? So what is? Let me ask you maybe more of a market question. How much capacity is in the shipping, in the tanker fleets in particular, right? If we did have some tariffs that came in and we had, a couple million barrels a day that we had to ship halfway around the world or something because of tariffs and economics. I mean, is the fleet there, or are we really setting ourselves up for a spike in rates?
Yeah, that ironically, that if the globalization will work very well, then it means that the very optimized the trade pattern should be established. However, that today's situation is creating that relatively inefficient the trade pattern. Likewise, that for example, that Russian oil and gas will go to India, and for example, or Brazilian the products will come to China or something like that. So that to some extent it's positive to shipping industry that this kind of the geopolitical situation. I'm not saying that it's a very good thing for the industry. However, that we can always find out the solution that how to adjust our position.
Right. Yeah, it was very flexible, right? As we saw with some of the Russian sanctions that went in. I mean, we essentially put 5 million barrels a day halfway around the world and without much of a blip, right? So Shaima, let me come to you. You operate, as you said, in Europe, but you're also in Vietnam. You've got product you're putting out of the Middle East, out of Oman. How do what do you kind of see across those markets, right? Those are very diverse markets and kind of where they are. And what would you tell us about how we should think about, growth and quality and maybe the decarbonization priorities?
So these three markets are different in the way how to deal with the energy mix. They try to balance three things: the sustainability, the security, as well as the affordability. And these priorities change from market to market. So if you go to Europe, then the focus is on the sustainability, so more and more into the decarbonization, and it is aligned with the EU regulations that's happening over there. But if you go further towards the Middle East, you'd see that they're in the middle. they're not more, they have the security because most of the fossil fuel is produced there. So from a security-wise, they have that security. From a sustainability, they're starting some of the initiatives as an oil nations that then they're focusing on some of the sustainability initiatives to showcase that they have the lowest carbon footprint and they maintain the competitiveness of their barrel. Right. But when you go to the farthest east, so Vietnam and others, they're thinking of affordability. Whatever is the cheapest mix of fossil fuels then would come as a priority on top of their list because it's the cheapest. They need to ensure the security, and this will help them reach the industrialization. They need that all of this energy to power their industrialization initiative. So it differs from one market to another, and it's good to have this diverse portfolio so that you can balance out your risk and ensure you're managing it across the different areas to meet their expectation.
Adds some complexity to your job, I suspect, to manage those, right? Andy, let me ask you, kind of in what I'll call the toolkit, right, of all the transport fuels options, right? Biofuel, electrification, carbon capture, methanol, e-fuels, right? What do you see kind of advancing today, and what are some of the things maybe that are potentially longer term?
Yeah, well, I'll just start that I think we need all forms, everything, okay? Everything needs to be on the table. Everything needs to be looked at. We need to be investing in all of these things. We also do need resilient policy. These lower carbon products do cost more. We haven't found many customers yet that are prepared to pay more for the alternative. And so it is going to require durable, I thought durable was a good word this week, resilient policies that can go past the timeline of a current administration or current position. The investments that we're making in this stuff are 25, 30-year investments. Yep. And so we've got to see that there's resiliency in some of those policies. We have invested, Chevron's invested in biodiesel, renewable diesel. We have a big project under construction right now. We're going to bring that project up. It's going to be, that product will be pointed towards either California or Europe. And those policies need to enable that product for people to buy them. I do think people are going to start to buy more lower carbon products, but it just isn't the way most of our customers are thinking about it today. So we've got a long ways to go. My short answer is we need everything, okay?
So how do we get, or how do you see that consumer evolving to where they do buy more, right? Is it all price, or is there a...
No, it's not.
Is there a marketing and an awareness and a greater good argument there?
There's a bunch of elements. I think we need some technology advancements, okay? A lot of people are working on that. I do think we need scale. Scale matters in this business, right? If you've got a facility that's got size and scale and capabilities, that's going to matter. We're going to do those kind of things at our existing facilities where we've got the infrastructure, we've got the people, the capability. We don't have to build a new site and make it green. So a lot of that's going to happen, Kurt. But it's just not happening as fast as people wanted it to.
Some people
but it's
want,
happening, okay? We're big in the biodiesel space. We're big in the renewable diesel space. We can make sustainable aviation fuel. Today, airlines aren't prepared to pay, other than maybe some niche players, they're just not prepared to pay for that extra cost. And that'll be something we'll have to work out as partners and others.
So you mentioned durability of policy. I mean, how do you broadly see the IRA? I mean, obviously some of the IRA elements have already been EV subsidies and stuff, but the other kind of core IRA stuff that you might be relying on to some degree, right?
Well, I'm not very good at predicting the future. If I was, I wouldn't be in this chair. I'd be retired on a beach somewhere. But we're watching it very closely, okay? We are talking to the administration. We're talking to the EPA. The conversations are constructive. I do believe they want some of these things to continue on. Some of them make good sense for the country, for the world. So it's nice to go to Washington and have those quality conversations with the people that are making those decisions. I don't know how it's going to go, but we're certainly trying to influence it to a good outcome.
Some of it could fit inside the energy dominance framework, right, that they're thinking about. Exactly. It's just doesn't all have to...
Yeah, and investment in the country.
And investment, like jobs, and so forth. Yeah, absolutely. So, Amber, let me ask you about hydrogen. I think BP's one of the companies that's staying with it, right? Again, maybe you're slowing some stuff and reprioritizing, but how do you think about hydrogen and kind of its future?
Yeah, so in hydrogen space, I mean, what we've seen, slower policy, probably slower advancement in the technology space, higher cost around that. We're looking at our refineries to kind of be that first customer. I think Andy's point to scalability is, it's really interesting, right? Because where you see opportunities in the U.S. and our Midwest refining space, which is you have an enormously large refinery. It sits around steel mills, which are potential customers, and that's where you see a really great opportunity for scalability. And so, like 45V and 45Q in the IRA are incredibly important to help understand when that happens. And I think the other piece is, when we look at our investment in hydrogen, and it's a little bit of a shift in our strategy, so you could take it back to the 2020 impacts, was we had around 20 or say 30 projects in the hydrogen CCS space. We're down to 5 to 7, 2 of those being around our refineries, one in Lingen in Germany and one in Spain. And what is important in those spaces is the fiscal support. And
Right.
whether that's in local or country governments, hydrogen has slowed, but we do still see it as relevant. It is really a great way to decarbonize heavy industry, and it's a great way for us to decarbonize our refineries.
Right.
And we expect that to still be here, probably just later in the decade.
So any early lessons learned from your projects in around hydrogen?
I mean, so the 2 projects in the refining space, and really what's important in both of these, we've got a 100 megawatt electrolyzer in Germany, a 25 megawatt electrolyzer in Spain with a partnership with Iberdrola. And while these are double-digit returns, they're a way for us to decarbonize the facility. It is a great opportunity for us to learn. So, we're not in origination anymore on these. We're in actually execution, not started up, of course. But I think, again, the learning so far, you've got to have the fiscal policy, and you have to have a view to where you can have a market. I think those are important. I think as we go through it, we are going to learn a lot as we start these up, and you think about how do you integrate those into an existing refinery. Listening this morning to some other folks talk, hydrogen, it's a tiny molecule. It's incredibly important to refining. And so we know how to deal with that today, and it's just how do you integrate that into an existing operation.
Right. So is most of that hydrogen being used then for hydrogenation in the refinery?
For now,
yes. And then you're able to get credit for that in some low carbon fuel framework.
Yes, that's exactly right. And
yeah.
I think the other piece, though, is to think about, as you do that, having your first offtake in a refinery, is how do you look at it to create that third party, right, to market it to someone else. I mean,
Right.
the cost is high right now, and we've got to think about how do you start to bring that down over time.
Okay, perfect. All right, so from refinery fuel to ship fuel, how do you, what's your view for kind of demand and evolution of low carbon fuels, and what's needed to kind of accelerate that?
Yeah, that as of today, that the most serious issue for us is that the supplyability, or that there is a demand. Certainly, that of course that the shipping is covering the quite wide range of the products, and some sectors, particularly for the B2C sectors, like the automobile and some relatively high-end products, that our customers really want to achieve the zero emission transportation. Likewise, the automobile industries, or the Amazon, or such kind of the people. Therefore, that they are ready to pay some kind of the premium. However, under the current market situation, that we cannot guarantee that supply of the green or biofuels.
Right.
But on the other hand, that the B2B sectors, like the crude oil transportation or iron ore transportation, that their value is not very high. And that the portion of the transportation cost is that maybe 20%, 30%, 15%,
Right.
something like that.
Right.
So that they are relatively reluctant to accept that the increase of the transportation cost. So therefore, shipping industry is covering that quite different type of the customers, or that we need to answer that each independent requirements. However, that as of today, that the price-wise, that the green or blue products will cost 3 times, 4 times
Right.
compared to the fuel oil, and the supplyability, the size of
Right.
the supply volume is still very limited. That is a problem.
It's a message to you, the supplier, the other 3 suppliers on here. There's an unmet demand down there. So fuels, tell us a little bit about this, the sale that you're working on. So that's another decarbonizing step. I know you've been working on this wind sale.
Yeah, it's that to utilize the wind assist the propulsion system.
Right.
It's not a very new idea. It's actually quite old idea.
A few centuries at least, right?
But it works. That it can certainly reduce that 5 to 10% the oil consumption, even if that we will install it on that the traditional the commercial shipping. Therefore, that economically it will be viable. But the oil in the past, that oil price is up and down and up and down. So that when the oil price was very expensive, such kind of the idea looked very appealing. However, that when the oil price went down, then the people lost that they are quite keen interest. Such kind of the things happen in past history. But nowadays, that in addition to that, to minimizing that the bunker oil costs, now we can see that another positive aspect that to reduce GHG. In addition to that, if we will convert into that the alternative fuels, like the green ammonia, green methanol, or green methane, or biomethane, that it will certainly much more expensive fuel. So that if we can reduce that consumption 10%, then the economic magnitude will be much bigger. That is the basic idea of us, so that we now that we are quite strongly promoting that idea to install the wind assist gadget on our fleet, and quite successful nowadays. Still, that only 2 or 3 vessels are on operation, but we already fixed that quite many contracts that to install these things on the even including that the LNG carrier, the chartered by Chevron. That's also that we are very excited about that.
Yeah, sounds very exciting, right? So I have to go down to the port and see one of those when they come in here in Houston somewhere. So Amber, I wanted to ask you a little bit about partnerships, right? You mentioned value creation and partnerships. Are there any particular partnerships you'd highlight as kind of good examples of what you're excited about?
I mean, so I've mentioned a lot of partnerships. I think the one that I'm most excited about is actually the one that we have with Palantir. And if I look at BP as a whole, we've had a partnership with Palantir since 2014. It's been primarily in the upstream side of our business. And now that we're moving into a more focus on digital into the downstream side, we're seeing a lot of opportunities, as you would expect. I mean, we have a challenge with each one of our Refineries has a different heritage, so that means they have different systems, and you've got to focus on managing the data before you can digitize the work process. With Palantir, we've kind of combined what we call data scientists with our engineers, and they have a platform that does this really well. And one of our mottos is, it's data in the morning, insights by lunchtime. And what it's really putting is, you have engineers, they come in, they're optimizing the plant, they're using our traditional tools, and they look at, well, this is the pressure that I need to look at, this is, the cut point that I need to look at. And data scientists actually take the data and they look at everything, and they say, well, might be interesting to you. And what we found is, that's one example. I think the other piece is, when you have problems in a plant, the ability to utilize all the data that's available to rule things out is incredibly important. And so there are some things that we have gone in the past from taking probably 2 weeks to we have answers from morning to lunchtime. Okay. And that's game changing. And then so the question becomes, how do I scale that as quickly as possible?
Right, exactly, right. And then how do you continue to drive automation, right, to where it's faster and faster, right? So keeping a human in the loop, I assume, now?
The human is still in the loop, and I would argue that the data quality and somebody understanding the plant matters, right? I don't yet see that we'll ever not need that. You still need that brain and that intervention to make sense of what that data is or isn't telling you. Right. But the ability for us to assess and understand data is it's a differential pace.
Yeah. Okay, good point. So we haven't mentioned AI yet. We should mention AI, and maybe Andy, I'll ask you, your AI journey and broadly digitalization thoughts following Amber.
Yeah, Amber's, I thought her comments are good. A company like BP or Chevron, the amount of data that we have or that we see, it could be retail pricing at a company-operated service station all the way to subsurface data in a place where we've just bought the information. And so to me, this is going to be the next game changer for Chevron, maybe for the world. I'll also add, hey, don't substitute artificial intelligence for actual intelligence.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, we still do need smart people to do something with that information. Yep. But it is going to be the thing that changes the way we do business today, the way many of you do business today. Yep. We can now get corrosion information at our fingertips to say, hey, that's when that pipe or that pump or that vessel is going to fail. Right. And today that takes a lot of people, a lot of time, a lot of data. So again, I think it's the game changer, and it's what's going to make our jobs exciting for the next many years.
So you're adding some robotics in there, I think, as well, right? And
robotics. We will clean a tank without having anybody go in it. We will inspect a tank without having anybody go in it. Not only is it better, it's cheaper. It's a heck of a lot safer. We're not putting people in confined space. So we're not gonna. I mean, that's an example of robotics. Maybe it's a drone that you can drive up and you can take a temperature off of a column today, where you'd have to scaffold that. You'd have to put people in harm's way. So the tools and the capabilities are advancing fast. And our biggest challenge in Chevron is people adopting those things. Okay, hey, we don't have to pilot it everywhere. We can just get on with it. It works. Please use it. That's probably the thing that I'm working on the most.
The scale challenge. Yep. So no, we see some of the same things actually in our business. But Shaima, I was going to ask you, anything on the technology front you'd highlight that you're excited about?
Actually, with all of this decarbonization, given that we're in Europe, we're more focused into a partnership with the technology providers and people with the know-how of how to produce the biofuels, biomethanes, and other kind of fuels. Technology is very important for the oil and gas business, regardless where you are in the value chain. And to reach the decarbonization goals, the technology needs to evolve faster than it is moving currently. I always take the analog of the solar panels. When the world started demanding the solar panels, we've seen how the technology of the solar and the PV that evolved very fast to reach very low cost per kilowatt, and hence This helped with the more and more adaptation of the solar and renewable energy in that terms in the area. Technology is very important, and the speed of technology that we have seen is very slow in the past few years in terms of decarbonization. So going even to the amber position in hydrogen. Hydrogen was one of the promising fuels, but the technology did not evolve. The logistic did not evolve to support that kind of proceeding towards that hydrogen economy. So technology is very important, and it's the focus of everybody's daily activity to ensure what is the right technology to adopt and when to adopt it.
You bet, you bet. So I'm just reminded, right, of the progress here, right? I mean, we're maybe refocusing, shifting things around, shaking things up a little bit, right? But it seems like there's some really interesting developments happening, and we're making progress, right? And I think technology is shaping all of us, right? Shaping all the industries, and I think our industry is, in many ways, kind of in the middle of the forefront of it, I think. So appreciate your time. Everybody, thank the panelists for a discussion today.
May we have your attention, please? Thank you for attending. Please consult the CERAWeek app for upcoming sessions and